Have you ever heard the name Garrett Hull? Okay. Garrett Hull was a Fort Worth police officer. And I said was, because after we passed SB4, all the concerns of making immigrant communities less safe, I warned, this is the beginning of how those things happen. I grew up in a time in the 70s where these kinds of, you'd be deported. So there was less people reporting crimes, calling in, becoming a part of law enforcement by being a witness to crimes. 17 times the bar in my district got robbed before Fort Worth PD finally did a sting. And when they did, one of the perpetrators put a bullet in the body of Garrett Hull, and we lost his life. So it made Garrett Hull less safe in fighting crime that occurs in immigrant communities. If bills like this make a community less safe, how do we respond to the families of law enforcement officers out there in a community that doesn't call law enforcement anymore?
Well, and it's a terrible thing to have loss of life from a veteran, from a police officer, or from anyone in a jail, regardless of the circumstances. I certainly hate to hear of anyone losing their lives in a jail. But I would say
This was on his beat.
Right.
As
But
an
I would
investigator.
say that this bill doesn't require anyone to go out into the street or do anything like that. If a sheriff, the sheriff can, if their department, through his leadership, and they want to enforce this, and if they want to determine people's immigration status when they stop and detain people for other charges, they have the absolute right to do that under Texas law now and under federal law. But what you're describing is something that happens outside the confines of a jail facility. There should not be loss of life by anyone, whether it be a defendant, someone that is detained, or whatever, or anyone else in that safe jail facility by virtue of this bill. And if someone chooses to participate in this 287G program, either at the first level or the second level, I don't see how that occurs, because all of that is happening within the confines of the jail. If they take it to that task force model where it goes out in the street and they have officers that are trained to interrogate and follow up with that, that's a different thing. But this bill does not require that to happen. This bill is not making people unsafe. This bill is not, it's not intended to have that effect, and I can't see any scenario where it would cause that. If a sheriff or a law enforcement department chooses to engage and do those things, which they may have every right to do, and unfortunately some things happen, they can do that, but it's not going to be by virtue of this bill.
But it's possible that they could. If you're not living in an incorporated city, then those sheriff's officers, that's who your law enforcement is.
I don't believe it's possible that this bill causes those things to happen. They can do that. It's possible that they can get into a skirmish or get into a situation where out in the streets where there's loss of life, but 100% it's not going to be caused by this bill. If they choose to participate and they choose to do those things, they can, but that's not, I respectfully disagree that this bill is going to cause it, because this bill doesn't cause it. It doesn't require them to participate and do anything outside the confines of the jail.
Well, this will be my last request.
Sure.
When you speak to law enforcement and their experience, and I would hope that there would be more law enforcement here that actually talk about what happens in those communities when laws that do allow for more ICE enforcement, presence enforcement, whether or not that makes those communities less safe. And I would testify to you that the reason why we don't have Garrett Hull with us still is because he didn't choose what kind of crime he was going to fight. He fought all kinds of crime. And in this case, it was an increase in crime against the undocumented community because they just stopped calling the law 17 times in a row. That same place got robbed before they finally did something. Not until those folks got put on the ground, and that was the fact. So I think that when these people testify, I hope that you would have that name in mind, that it wasn't about that undocumented person that some people may want to see like a criminal, but it was about Garrett Hull, a Fort Worth police officer, who went out there to try to keep that from happening, and he ended up losing his own life.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Thank
I
you
will
for
say
allowing me
this,
to be
the concerns that you've raised, that Representative Weiner has raised, those are things that I will look into, and I'm certainly willing to have a discussion to, if we're going to have a bill, my position always is to have the best bill that I can, and I'm certainly open to working on that, to have some of those safeguards and some of those issues that have been brought up addressed.
I look forward to the
Thank you.
conversation.
You bet. All right.